Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Vicky St. Clair, and our webcast is presented by Aquent Federal. Our presenter is Aquent's solution strategist, Robin Simonsen. And I'm told that one of the questions that Robin gets asked the most is, why does my group need account management? How can we set that up? What can it do for me, for my clients? And what can it do for my creative agency? Well, that's what we're going to address today in Why Your Agency Needs Account Management. And before I introduce our guest speaker, let me tell you just a little bit about Aquent. Aquent's a marketing, communications, and creative agency. They've worked for more than 30 years with some of the biggest and best industry brands. And Aquent Federal specializes in partnering with government agencies. Federal's mission is to innovate design in government, and they work in all media and across all platforms. We are on Twitter at Aquent Federal, so if you'd like to tweet during the webcast, please feel free to share any ideas or thoughts you'd like. You can use the hashtag Aquent Federal. Now, the format of today's webcast is going to be a little different. First, Robin will present a short high-level overview of what account management is, what account managers do and don't do. And then we'll move into a more in-depth conversation between Robin and Leanne Dries, who is Vice President of Aquent Federal. And they'll discuss some frequently asked questions on the subject of account management. We'll end with an open Q&A where we'll answer your questions. So please feel free again to type any questions into the chat box as they come up, and I'll make sure they're answered before the end of the webcast. All right, so let me introduce today's speaker to you. She is Robin Simonsen. She's a solution strategist for Aquent Studios, and she brings a strategic vision and deep expertise around integrating business processes into the execution of marketing and creative functions. You can see from here that she's launched and managed engagements with huge companies such as Target and Booz Allen Hamilton. And in her previous role, Robin led the Aquent consulting team, which was dedicated to providing clients with in-depth assessments of their creative services. So she truly is an expert on the subject of account management, and we're very pleased to have her join us today. Robin Simonsen, welcome. Thank you, and I'm going to turn this over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for joining. And I just wanted to say that I selected this subject for our webcast today because my experience is that the account management role is so often undervalued by internal creative groups. So that's why I want to speak about it a bit today. I want to talk about the importance of the role. And the importance of the role not just at large advertising agencies, where it's of course a given, but in your internal groups as well. What the value of account management is, and how the whole group can be empowered by a strong account manager. And then as Vicky said, there's a number of very commonly asked questions that we'd like to address. Next. So I suggest that you think of account managers as the face of your organization. It's their knowledge or lack of it that can greatly impact a client's perception of your group. And their skills will often make a big difference in the creative result. They can make the difference between a mediocre design result and a really polished, effective communication. And as the face of your organization, they can also be very key to your business development. And that's an area that is often goes unrecognized. And I want to talk a little more about it later. Their expertise and their client relationship building and their outreach skills, if they have them, can have a huge impact on your business growth, and favorably or unfavorably. So what are some of the ways that an account manager can bring this kind of value? So first, a good account manager makes it easy for internal clients to work with your agency. And that shouldn't be underestimated. That can make the difference as to whether they choose to bring the work to you or not. Also, when they have a track record of successful projects, they also build client trust. And what you'll find is that when the clients truly trust their account manager, they'll stop micromanaging the work. And the less micromanaging that goes on, the more effective your team can be and more efficiently they can do their job. And also, a strong account manager should understand the resource needs and be able to accurately estimate the time requirements that are required for the effort. And that'll enable your team to deliver on budget, which is not insignificant. And if they effectively gather all project requirements and objectives at the beginning, at intake, and accurately and completely communicate those requirements and objectives, your design team can deliver on-target creative, also vital. You want to advance? So when you do it right the first time, that eliminates the extensive and the frustrating redos that are so prevalent when intake is not complete. Let me give you an example. When we started working with a proposal company in DC, designing graphics for their many RFP responses, our first project with them went very badly. We executed the graphics per the information that they provided us, but then we were required to redo the graphics 2, 3, even 4 times before we really got a handle on what the client wanted. So that was a painful experience, painful to the designers as well as to the client. And after that experience, our account manager dug a little deeper and found that each proposal could have a unique set of requirements, and it might have a unique project owner as well. So she developed a detailed set of intake questions that captured all specifications and requirements right up front so the team could get it right the first time, and then they did. So account manager roles vary tremendously. The role is viewed so differently in different environments. It's everything from order takers, front desk people who simply intake and record requests. In other environments, they're project coordinators who just traffic tasks through the studio. In others, they're project managers, and they're accountable for the project outcomes. In other environments, they guide their internal clients through the process, and they're consultative partners. But more rarely, but it does happen, they're the true communication experts that clients turn to. So when you're thinking about account management for your agency, it's really important to identify the right level of skills and expertise that they need for your agency. Give real thought to the skills and experience that they need to bring the most value to the clients that work with you. Their skills have to align with the project work that they're managing. So in evaluating the skills requirement for your account managers, start with thinking about the type of work that your agency does today. Things like, is it primarily simple edits and revisions? Are you doing internal communications, or are they external facing? Are you working in one specific channel, or do you work across multiple channels? And are you involved in developing strategic messaging? You can appreciate that the skills and the expertise needed to lead projects would vary greatly with the kind of work that your agency does. But also, you should think about your vision for how you want to grow your agency and how you want it to evolve. What kind of agency do you want to become? And what kind of work and clients are you trying to attract? A strong account manager can bring value that's beyond your existing scope of work. So think about having an account manager who's knowledgeable not only on the work that you currently do have, but who can help you grow in the direction that you envision. To illustrate, we recently placed a very skilled account manager who has a proactive focus on process improvement and is an effective change manager. And we placed her to lead a new engagement with a large aeronautics and defense manufacturer. So we knew that she would be a great fit for the work and culture there because that company highly values process improvement and innovative approaches. And she is indeed growing the account. So think about your prospective growth clients. What are their key needs? Who do they work with now and why? Try to identify why they aren't using your agency today or not as often as you would like them to. Do they work with a large external agency partner? And if so, what support do you think they're probably getting from their account manager there? So try to be sure that your account managers can provide a similar level of expertise and support. Identify the gap and then close the gap, and the right account manager can help you do that. For most creative leaders of internal groups, the ultimate goal is to be their client's creative agency of choice. So whether your clients come to you because they're told to or because they choose to, a strong account manager can be invaluable in building the trust and confidence of your clients, and thus building the reputation of your agency.
Well, thank you, Robin. That was a great high-level overview there. So we're now at the part of the webcast where Lee Andries is going to join us, and we're going to look at some frequently asked questions because I know from talking with Robin that she's asked constantly about account management. So we can go a little bit more into depth here. And just a reminder to those of you who've joined us, if you have questions of your own, please type them into the chat box at any time, and I will make sure we answer them before we close out today. So let me introduce Lee Andries for those who don't know her. She's been with Aquent for more than 18 years. She's the Vice President of Aquent Federal Division, and she plays a pivotal role in strategic management. Her group, Aquent Federal, is focused primarily on innovating design in government, and I know they're all extremely passionate about this. So Lee's a great person to connect with if you're looking to innovate design in your agency. Lee Andries, thanks for joining us. I'll turn this over to you so you and Robin Simonsen can go through some facts.
Thank you, Vicki, and thank you, Robin. I appreciate all your work on this and help. So, yeah, as Vicki was saying, that many of the government agencies that we work with, some have very sophisticated in-house agencies, Robin, and others don't. So, and some of them, Robin, just have like one person in their organization. So these questions are really around how and when and who and what. So the first question I have is, how does a strong account management person help a designer deliver a better product and even outcome result, right? So results are really important right now for everybody, not just government, but it's really about how does that account manager help that designer produce a better product and potentially better outcome?
Right. Let me answer that with an example. So one of the large global law firms that we work with in New York City that holds a high-profile alumni event every year. And in the past, the requests for the event materials would come into the studio piecemeal. A save the date email, then a formal invitation or agendas, speaker schedules, and so on. And each was treated as a one-off. And the result was that the design was really only loosely tied together. But one particular year, our account manager gleaned that the director of the law firm really wanted to elevate the perception of the event. So he, our account manager, proactively initiated a brainstorming session. And the results were a cohesive communication strategy and also a creative theme for the event. So with the deeper insight achieved from that brainstorming around the goals and the audiences at the event, the team initiated some real innovative communications that added real polish and excitement to the event that hadn't been part of it before. Things like including a series of coming soon teasers that created real buzz around the event. There was a cool closing video that included live shots from the day, and a really fun cliffhanger that was a teaser, as it were, for the next year's event. So the feedback from the director was really stellar. And the design team loved working on the event, where in the past there had been very little enthusiasm. And they proudly added the creative results to their portfolios. So it was a very different result because of the efforts of the account manager.
So Robin, what I'm hearing is that, so the account manager becomes, they have to have a bit of a level of business acumen, right? To where the designer may not have as much experience on the business side of things, right? Does that make sense?
If by the business side, you mean the communication goals and objectives and audiences, absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. You wouldn't think that an account manager would have that much of an impact like that, right? The designer can go right to the client, but based on your experience and what I'm hearing here is it could almost be a night and day experience.
It can be, because as everyone who's worked in creative groups knows, many clients don't tell you what you need to know in order to have an effective communication. They don't know what they need to tell you. It needs to be elicited. You need to be able to get a sense of what they need that's beyond what they're asking for, and that's a strength of a good account manager.
Yeah. And as designers, we sometimes let the passion get in the way, right?
Well, it may be, or maybe it's just you're more enthused about the creativity and not recognizing what the real goal of the communication is.
Yeah, let's go with that. So here's my next question for you. How do you recommend aligning account managers in a design team or on a design team?
Okay, so that also really depends on the environment, but I'll answer with two different examples. So at one of our large pharmaceutical clients, their entire global marketing organization is aligned by brand. So we mirrored that alignment with our account managers. So that allowed each account manager to become an expert in the brands they supported and to build really strong relationships with the brand marketers. And that was an effective alignment in that environment. But at MasterCard, the internal studio supported well over 100 different business units with varied communication types. And the business units were each busy at different times of year, quiet at others. And so in that environment, it was totally not practical to align the account managers to specific business units. But what made sense was to align them to communication channels, such as print, multimedia, web, mobile, and so on. So that alignment allowed the account managers to share their channel-specific expertise across the whole organization, and also to be instrumental in implementing consistent best practices within their specific channel. So that worked in that environment.
Interesting. Boy, this could get very complex, can it, Robin?
Well, you have to look at the kind of work you're doing for whom, for what groups. I mean, in some organizations, it's coming from just 2 or 3 stakeholder groups, and the relationships are built just in those groups. So you want to align them within those stakeholder groups. In other cases, it's really about the expertise and the kind of work. So you have to look at what you're doing and who you're doing it for.
So in either of these situations, is what the companies were going for in having that account management role, is it to improve efficiency or improve the quality of the product, improve the result of the product? So in those two situations, why was account management, that role, so important?
Well, account management was vital in both environments and was already acknowledged by the time we were aligning these people, because the business owners or the stakeholders, the project owners, they were not communication specialists. They're business people that have a need for a communication. And so it was vital that there be a contact for them that knows about communications, can channel their efforts in the right direction and get a good result. Because again, they have a need for a communication, but that's not what their expertise is.
Yeah, and who would they know to talk to on those teams, right? So, and instead of talking to 5 or 10 people, they just talk to this one person who can wrangle up all the right resources at the right time.
Exactly right.
Interesting. Okay. And so, should account managers drive their own projects? And so, yeah, where do account managers and traffic kind of fit, and where do they cross that line, or how does that work? So, yeah, how do those two roles play?
Okay, so in general, an account manager can manage a larger volume of projects and support a lot more stakeholders. You want to probably advance the slide, if they do have traffic support. But however, that said, in some environments where most of the projects are small, quick turn requests, then the traffic role is actually somewhat redundant to that of the account manager. And so it doesn't bring the same value. But when projects vary in complexity, and some projects require significant project management, traffic support is really vital.
Interesting. So complexity, from what I'm hearing so far, complexity, the type of product that they're working on, how many of those projects are available or there, but also I think that complexity piece is really interesting, because the more repetitive the work is, the less you probably need an account manager, more just traffic support and project manager, right?
Well, when it's repetitive and quick turn, you may still need the relationship building skills of an account manager. But remember how we talked about how the roles are different in different environments, and in some cases their main function is pushing tasks through the studio, and others they're very consultative. So this is a case where the account manager's skills and relationship management might be vital, but their actual work effort on projects is a lot more related to traffic. So you really might have multiple account managers, but not traffic support. In other environments where there's large, complex projects, you might have several account managers and then traffic people supporting them and working as a team.
Got it. Cool. All right, so why is strong account management so critical to successful business development? So this is the question I'm asking really is, we talked about growing. You placed an account manager inside, I believe you said, an aerospace organization, and they actually helped to grow that business. So can you explain more about what that actually looks like?
Yes, and I'm really glad you asked about that, because this is one of the areas that's most overlooked or undervalued when people think about the role of account managers. And let me first give you a couple of examples, and then I'll talk about it a little bit more in general. So at one in-house creative group, they were asked to reinvent an internal newsletter. So the account manager dug in with the stakeholder group, exploring questions like who reads the newsletter now and how do they read it? Do they read it online? Do they read it in email? And so on. Who's responding to your newsletter now, and who do you want to be reading it that isn't reading it? And so on. So our account manager was able to guide the conceptualization of a completely new approach to the delivery of the newsletter content. But the real added benefit for the creative agency was the fact that this reinvented newsletter showcased the skills of the in-house team across the whole organization, which led to real business growth for the creative team. So you can see that the way the project was managed and the results generated a lot more business for the internal team. and
Wow.
raised awareness of their skills. Another example. So several years ago, we launched a partnership with one of the largest DC consulting firms to execute their new branding across a really broad range of marketing deliverables. So initially, they perceived our agency services as very tactical, creative execution. So our account manager not only immediately caught on to the branding and the messaging, which of course was essential, but also observed that their processes were ad hoc and not very effective, and worked to build out a process that was much more efficient, and it shortened their cycle times and reduced their costs. So that success really built confidence with the client in our account manager and opened the door for her to introduce real expanded service offerings. So today, the partnership includes developing new campaigns and bringing communications into new channels and much higher level creative work, which was the direct result of the relationship building and the trust that was achieved by the account manager. So those are two examples.
Nice.
But in general, the answer is this. The account manager can raise awareness of the internal creative capabilities across the organization. And in addition to that, because they're interacting across the organization, they become aware of different opportunities or specific initiatives that the creative group can step toward. So they're raising the awareness for the creative leaders of opportunity, and they're raising the awareness of capabilities with the client base. And they can leverage a successful initiative that was done for one client. They can leverage that when another client is considering a similar initiative. So the relationships built on one project can be leveraged for the next, and so on. It's really a very key part of what a strong account manager can do.
So it's interesting because, you know, the government, along with industry, there's really no difference here, but the customer experience, you know, even when you think of service design, it really is about designing for that entire initiative, not just that one product, but how does this one product fit into an entire experience within that agency? And, you know, the government is nothing but providing services to the United States citizen, right? And obviously one another. So what I'm hearing is that this account manager really is that pivotal relationship point. So, yeah, I mean, just like any vendor, right?
Well, yes, and if they've won the trust of their constituency, so to speak, then their outreach is very effective.
Yeah.
Much more effective than sort of a cold outreach that comes to an email campaign or whatever.
Cool. All right. So designers managing their own projects. So, and I will tell you that we've got, we're working with a very large in-house creative agency right now. In fact, it's our entire team is going to comprise this agency. And one of the things that our client wanted is the ability for the designer to manage their own workload and their own projects. But what I'm hearing is that that's probably not the best practice. Can you help me understand why?
Yes. It isn't generally best practice, but I can tell you that it isn't that it can never work either, but it isn't the best practice we recommend. I'll give you an example to try to illustrate the point. It may not be very relevant to the type of projects you're talking about, I'm not sure, but a software client of ours launched their initiative to rebrand about 3,500 pieces of sales collateral. And they insisted that they wanted the designers to manage their own work because they wanted to avoid the cost of project management. But it was a bad experience, and it was a bad experience initially when we launched it that way. It was a bad experience for the client and for the designers, and certainly for the agency management as well, because designers that were distracted by responding to email and assembling the changes, they were less productive, and they started overrunning budgeted time allotments and falling behind schedules. Also, there was no reporting, so the clients didn't have any way of knowing the status of the materials that were in process. And we really couldn't bring any order to the process to maximize efficiency that way because there was no oversight. So when we called a halt to that process and we put a strong account manager in place, she brought order and process efficiency and actually finished the project ahead of schedule and with a lot less stress. So the answer, that's one example. But so the answer in general, though, is that process management can amount to as much as 25% of the work effort on projects. That's an average. It can be more even, but that's an average. So process is typically not a designer's strength. They thrive when they're designing. And many are really frustrated by process meetings and project tracking details. And they even have a tendency to bypass some of those process details that can be pretty important to the project's overall success. So I find that designers that are bogged down in process, answering the emails, assembling all the edits from the various stakeholders, that they spend too little time actually doing what they do best. And I so frequently hear them complain that those kinds of interruptions inhibit their creativity. So that's why I don't see it as best practice.
Interesting. So since you brought up cost, Robin, let's go ahead and touch on that for just a second. So your client didn't want to have an account manager in there, right? For this example, and you found out the cost was that the work wasn't getting done, and there was probably some dissatisfaction going on with the designers and blah blah blah. So how do you factor in the cost of that project manager into the projects, especially so a lot of our agency clients are fee-based, so they charge their services back into the organization. How does the account manager cost get put into that, or is that just considered overhead and it's just money gone?
Well, again, like with many of these other things, it varies with environment. Two typical approaches. One is account management is sometimes considered a fixed cost, part of the budgeted overhead for the internal creative organization. That's one way it's approached. And in that case, the project owners themselves are not charged back for the account management time that's spent on their projects. But in other environments, it is absolutely a billable function. And when there's a project estimate, there's a certain amount of hours or time of account management included in it. And it's just like you would have designer hours, copywriter hours, proofreader hours. You also have account management hours, and that's just as common a process as the other.
So that's interesting. So I'm going to stay on that question. Can we go back a slide, please, Vicki? Because I haven't even gotten to that question yet. I'm still on this other question. So who do I have to sell the idea? Can a designer on an in-house design studio go to the head of that studio and recommend getting a project manager? And if they're to do that, this is kind of like a critical point, right? So me as a designer, I'm coming to complain about having to get sucked into all these meetings, and I can't come up with really good concepts and that I would really like to do. So I go to the head of the studio or to the design manager and I say, we should really get an account manager. Like, what are the things that you would want to hear from me as a designer that say we need an account manager?
Okay, so first of all, I don't find that that's usually the way it goes.
Oh, okay.
I really don't. I don't
Okay.
find that it's the designers that step toward the idea of having an account manager.
Okay.
I definitely hear designers complain about the details, and I hear them saying, I got so much email, I can't meet this deadline. But I find that the solving of the problem with effective account management is the one, it comes more not from the designer, but from whoever's accountable for the organization as a whole with the operational responsibility. So I don't really see it as bubbling up from the designers, although whoever is receiving the complaints about all the interruptions, if they're an experienced manager of creative organizations, that would be a red flag to them that they needed a intermediary.
Got it. So as a design manager, you should be mindful of the complaints that you get in that manner. Got it. Okay.
Yes, it's really the leader of the group that has to be aware of how important the role is.
Got it. Vicki, can we go to the next slide, please? So let's talk about estimating the project cost. So do the account managers, because again, a lot of times designers are coming up with the cost if there isn't an account manager, or the project manager does. So how does that work when a project manager is involved? Who prices out the project?
Okay, so in most environments, the accurate estimating of a project is the function of the account manager. Now, again, the term account manager in some environments is called project manager. So, but it's a project management or an account management function. But it isn't done in a vacuum. So often it's done collaboratively with the lead designer or with the lead copywriter. But what it does require is an understanding of the required effort for every step in the process, not just one. And that's why it's so important for an account manager to understand the creative process from the beginning to end. And there's another thing that's required too, and it fits with the account management function, and that's the ability to balance client expectations with the budget constraints that they bring you. And that takes a good deal of expertise at times. And another part of it is that, as everyone knows, project requirements change as projects evolve. And when the account manager has estimated the project, knows exactly what work effort was included in that original estimate, they're in a position to evaluate whether the changes are going to impact that work effort, and they have to provide a new estimate. And in fact, it's such an important part of an account manager's job that I find it's a very valuable performance metric for an account manager, that accuracy of estimate to actuals. It's a performance metric we use consistently.
Interesting. You said accuracy of estimates? Is that what you're saying?
To actuals. In other words, when you really got it done, how close to the work effort and the cost did it actually come out? Did it get overrun every time, or can you accurately estimate what it'll take?
And that would be the responsibility of that account manager to.
It really is, because it may be something that has to be done collaboratively with members of the team, but assembling that estimate and getting the client to agree to that estimate and committing that much budget to it, that's the role of the account manager.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Skills for account managers. So say, for example, we wanted to, right now we don't have an account manager on our in-house. Well, that's not true. We kind of do. But if we really wanted to add that account manager role to a team, what are the skills that we should be looking for? Okay,
so as we've discussed a bit in the earlier part of our webcast, the skills and the specific expertise that an account manager needs will be very specific to the kind of work that the agency is handling. But that said, there are three things, we call it the 3 C's, that every account manager must be well-versed and have the skills in, and that is communication, collaboration, and consultation. They need, obviously, to be able to communicate both to the client and to the internal team to get the effective result. And they have to be able to elicit the kind of collaboration and teamwork that yields great results. That's a strength. And they should also be in a position to provide consultation, to be able to guide clients when it's needed. So those are the 3 key personality traits or skill sets that I would emphasize.
And so you know, you're talking about pricing as well. So these are 3 of the soft skills. So some of the technical skills that they should have might be, you know, maybe project management, utilizing different project management tools, or, you know, I don't know if that agile development methodology would float in here or not, but, you know, some of those.
If projects are very complex,
skills, yeah.
If projects are very complex, that might be appropriate. But more times than not, it's some kind of a project management tool, and an account manager can learn that tool in one environment and a different tool in another, because it's really, how do you communicate information? The specific tool that's used for communicating it isn't as significant as their understanding of what must be communicated, when, and how to every team member.
Yeah. Those interpersonal skills are probably the high value.
I think they really are, and I think
Yeah.
the idea of being able to elicit collaboration is very important. I mean, you brought up the idea of the estimating in the context of these 3. Estimating is a collaborative effort, and it also is collaborative with the client in the sense that they bring a budget number, and if they've asked for something that can't be achieved within that, there's a collaborative effort to get to a solution that fits within their budget, just as an example.
Got it. All right. So I have one more question for you. So when is it appropriate to introduce an account? Like, if you don't have, so here I am in an organization. It's been a fairly consistent relationship between a designer and the end client, the program manager. And so in the government, things are usually pretty formal. In industry, sometimes, you know, the bigger the company, the more formality there is. But how am I, as a design leader of an organization, what's the best way for me to go about, this is change management, right? So what's the best way for me to introduce the role of the account manager for my team, and then introduce that role of an account manager to my clients, to the program managers? What are your recommendations there?
Well, I might have to understand better how you're working now, but because if you literally have a one-to-one relationship, one designer always supports one program manager, you know, maybe you don't need an intermediary as long as they're working efficiently together. But in more environments, you have multiple project owners or multiple program people feeding work into the group. And then it becomes very important, because then you don't want the stakeholder tapping someone on the shoulder, someone who's working for another project where their skills are vital. You need to have someone managing the flow of work to the right people, so the right people are doing the right work at the right time. So does that make sense? I mean, if you are literally working as a team, program manager and designer, maybe you don't need anybody in between. But that's an unusual circumstance.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Robin, do you ever see people move? I mean, you know, the question to me has always been, you know, are creative directors always creative directors, or were they designers? And some creative directors have never been a designer. They're more the manager, or writers. They come up from writing. So account managers, if you were to give advice to a design leader and say, you know, you can groom people to become the account manager, but we don't necessarily see that coming from designers. So are these people that are groomed, or are they more groomed from a project management role into an account manager, or what?
The path is there's a couple of different paths. Project managers who have client-facing skills, because that's a key part of it. It's not just someone who can make a project happen. It's someone who can interface with clients and make a project happen. So, but they often do come up through a project management function, or they may come up through a traffic management function. They understand all the tasks and the timing of things that have to come together to get a finished product. And as they grow and learn more about the business, they are able to manage projects that are a little bit more complex. They're not just trafficking, they require an understanding of messaging, and they grow through that path. But it generally is not a growth path for a designer. It doesn't lead to a happy result usually. The designers may want to move into creative direction, but we're talking about a more administrative project management role here, not creative direction. It's not the same thing.
Interesting. And account managers should have an understanding at least of a creative process, right? And
it's essential. It's essential.
Okay.
And but even not in a very specific way. For example, if they're going to be an account manager managing a great deal of digital work, they need to understand every function involved in developing a complex website, the front end, the back end. They need to know who does what and in what order. But they don't necessarily, if that's what they're managing, they don't necessarily need to know the same thing with regard to video. But if they're managing video, they better know the ins and outs of that process. So it takes a great deal of expertise, but it sometimes is a bit of a narrower. That it's not across every facet of the creative process.
You know what this reminds me of, Robin? You know when you go in to get your car serviced and they have that service manager? So you don't necessarily talk to the technician, you talk to the service manager who is amazingly well-versed in automotive, right? They know everything about the vehicle that you're seeking to get help on. So this is pretty much the same thing where you're going to that service advisor that says, this is what I'm trying to do, and then, kind of makes things happen magically behind the scenes.
Well, there is some validity to that analogy. And the other piece of it is that service director knows which of its technicians really know that particular model and that particular type of issue, and puts the right person on the task.
Yep.
And that's a piece of it as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. Well, this has been exceedingly helpful, and I know Vicki has questions from the audience, so I'm going to turn it back to Vicki, and thank you very much for your time, Robin. Vicki, to you.
Yes, thank you, Lee. You might stay on because you might have some more input here, but Robin, I can totally see why they call you the expert on account management. You answered so many questions there, and I do have a couple of questions here for you. And that is who the account manager usually reports to. You did kind of touch on how environments are so different and you have to align your account management with your environment needs. But I can tell you personally that I've worked with many account managers. Some have reported to the sales team, some have reported to the creative director. Is there a typical reporting scenario there?
Well, that's a very good question, Vicki, and it's a little problematic because when an account manager reports to a creative director, there sometimes is a conflict. But in many environments, remember, there's an account management team, and then they report to the head of the agency or the head of the group. There may even be an account management team, and there's a lead account manager who reports to the head of the agency. It's a combination of a sales and an operational role. In an external ad agency, it often rolls up to more of the business development side. But in an internal group, it's usually operational with client-facing skills. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense. Yeah, it does, because you've stressed this throughout the webcast, how important those people-facing skills are. Those interpersonal skills are critical. Just last chance throw out here for anyone who's joined us. Please, if you have a question, now's the time to type it in so that we can get it answered for you. So I have one more question that came in so far, Robin, and that is when you're talking with clients and and again, this is going to vary depending on the type of client you're talking with and their specific needs. But I'm sure you run into objections that are fairly common. I wonder if we could just look at those so we know how to overcome them. What's the
You mean
objection?
objections to working with an account manager?
Yes, it's like,
yes.
well,
Okay.
everything's working fine. Why do you know? But they
Yes.
have objections. So, what do those objections usually look like?
Yes. Well, it's usually in an environment where the client wants to be able to pick which designer does the work. And they want to be able to walk into the agency or call up the designer and give them their task. Then they object to having they have to talk to an account manager who will then determine who does the work and how and when. It is a case of that, as I mentioned early in the webcast, there's a tendency of some clients to want to micromanage the project, and they're the ones that resist the introduction of account management until that account manager has proven their worth. And that is a process. Others who've had the experience of working with well-run creative organizations that have the function don't resist at all. It's the micromanagers that resist.
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
We don't have any other questions coming in. I think you did such a thorough job, and especially in the Q&A part with Lee, Robin Simonsen and Lee Andres. You covered so much ground there that I think we got all of our questions answered today. So Robin Simonsen, I know how busy you are, and I really do appreciate you joining us today. Shed a lot of light on account management for us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I was glad to do it, and if anyone has follow-up, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Lovely. Well, you can see here, we're going to wrap things up, but Aquent Federal has been very busy. These are just a few of the clients they work with, have worked with, and are still working with. And as I said earlier in the webcast, they're focused totally on innovating design in government. So if you want to talk to anybody about the possibility of partnering with Aquent Federal, or you just have questions, maybe you have a problem that you'd need a little help with and want to talk with someone, this is the person you need to talk with. She's Lee Andres, and of course she was part of the FAQ with Robin Simonsen on the webcast. Lee's Vice President of Aquent Federal, and you can reach her by telephone or by email, and she's also on Twitter, and we have the website up there as well, so you can jump on that. But I'd say just give Lee a call. She's very receptive to taking calls, and I know she'd love to hear from you. All right, that about wraps it for today. We do have another webcast coming on April 27th. Brent Northam will be joining us. He's going to talk about using agile approaches to improve business performance in marketing and creative organizations. So looking forward to that too. Again, I want to thank you for being with us today, and enjoy the rest of your week.